Hello and welcome to the News from the Real World podcast. We're coming to you from Carnegie Mellon's Media Lab. You can follow us on our Twitter hashtag NFTRW, or you can look at our website, which should be down in the right-hand corner of our screen here right now. Today I'm joined by Margo Gray, a first-year director.
Hello.
This is Jake Rothermel, third-year technical director.
Hi there.
And I'm Lauren Mills. I'm a third-year scenic design grad. So we're going to start off by talking about productivity. Margo, why don't you tell us about it?
Yes, to be more productive, you need to relax. So the title of this article, which is an editor, it's a student pick this week, is "Relax, You'll Be More Productive." Comes from Tony Schwartz at the New York Times. Mm-hmm. The idea here is that the greater the performance demand, the greater the need for renewal. But often we experience the opposite impulse, which is to push ourselves harder to get all the work done that we think we need to do. So Schwartz has all these suggestions that seem a bit counterintuitive at first, but that he has proven, various studies have proven, to actually make folks more productive. He's been implementing them in his own company for years, and they've never had anyone quit. So I think that speaks very well to these things that he suggests. Some of his suggestions involve working in 90-minute cycles. You may be familiar with the concept that we have 90-minute sleep cycles. He suggests we also have 90-minute productivity cycles, and that folks are most productive for only about 4.5 hours a day. After that, you're really just spinning your wheels. That naps can increase your productivity, short 20-minute naps, longer sleep, and more vacation time. Folks at his company start off with 4 weeks of vacation a year, which is pretty swell. But apparently, the more you vacation, the better you're able to work when you come back. So work hard, play hard.
Submit my resume to his company.
Yeah, exactly. So there were a lot of comments about how people thought that these were great suggestions, but that sometimes in the theater, we're in work situations that don't really allow these things to happen. So my question is, how can you practice these sorts of techniques if your workplace doesn't value them, or if it's not set up in such a way that it makes these sorts of things easy?
Yeah, I think we all can relate to being overworked or having too much on our plate, etc. And a lot of the comments reflected that too. But I really think a lot of it is just about discipline. Mm-hmm. I mean, as someone who's currently going through the maddening prospect of writing his thesis, my impulse is to spend every waking moment at my computer writing. And actually, this article came at a really good time when I'm actually looking forward to trying to put some of his suggestions into practice and only working actively for 90 minutes. But I think it takes a lot of discipline to one, work straight for 90 minutes without distractions. And if you're at a computer, there's all sorts of distractions out there. And then when you take that cycle off to do something that's very different from what you're doing during that 90-minute work cycle. So if you're writing at a computer, don't spend your break time on Facebook or doing some other website. Get up, he talked about going for a run or napping or having lunch outside and that kind of thing. So I was sort of inspired by it a little bit to try some of that, because frankly I'm desperate. And anything that can help, I'll take.
I also thought that it was interesting that he framed this in a way that he's talking about increasing energy. That we have a finite amount of time, but we can increase our energy in reaction to it. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I've actually found really useful in thesis and various projects, is that it's better for me to work and then really take a good break than to keep pushing through it, because at that point I'm just really spinning my wheels.
Yeah, he even says that the productivity is he almost sort of put it into mathematical terms, that productivity is a function of energy management and not so much a function of time management, which I found I never really thought of it in those terms. So anything that could break that up and give the idea of productivity in a new light, I think is helpful.
I also appreciate, it was very mathematical in the way that he broke it down. So the greater the performance demand, the greater recovery demand. So the idea is that you work as much as you can recover. Mm-hmm. And if you keep that balance, then you should be okay to continue at that pace. Yeah. Which I think is a good thing to be conscious of.
Yeah, and I think the trap really is that if you're going to put into practice this 90-minute work interval, that you really do work for 90 minutes, and you don't sit down and say, okay, well, I'm going to check my email and then I'll start. Oh, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll do this. No, 90 minutes, you are working. You don't do anything else. Close your internet browser and whatever else you have up, and just do that work that you're supposed to be doing, and then you can take a break after 90 minutes. And I think that's really important, and probably a he doesn't really emphasize that, but I took away that as being the crux of being able to manage your energy and reciprocate that.
Yeah.
Afterwards.
Last week we talked about procrastination, and so I think with those two ideas combined, it's a powerful way to manage your time and your energy.
So a really interesting article. I think it has a lot of good advice for us in our productivity management here. We're going to move on to a related article. This is an article from the Washington Post entitled "Warning to College Professors from a High School Teacher." This is an editor pick. And this this high school teacher writes to a college professor explaining why students today are not prepared to enter college. And it gets into No Child Left Behind and the flaws that have kind of trailed behind it in that stead. Have you guys seen any of this in the students that you've worked with here? I mean, we're kind of getting to the point where these are the students that are entering college, the students that have been under No Child Left Behind for the full time now. So I think we all escaped that. But are you guys seeing this at all today?
I don't know that I can speak specifically to No Child Left Behind. I mean, I'm freaking 35 years old, so I left public school, in the middle of the 90s. So, there are so many differences between the way I was a student and the students that I see entering college now that I don't know that I can really differentiate one specific tactic or thing from just a generational gap at this point.
Yeah. I would say that arts access is one thing that I notice. I mean, a lot of this article is about teaching to the test, and there's a brief mention of the fact that the first things that are usually cut are arts programs. And I think that is a continuing problem, that when you look to diversity, or when you look to even economic diversity of these classes, the people who have had training at high level training are likely to be people who are financially well off, who have had some sort of advantage in that area. Certainly not people who are in a one of these condemned by No Child Left Behind schools, which are being punished for having underperforming students, essentially.
I mean, I also think that you talk about underperforming students. These tests are designed to measure success. They don't test skills of analysis. They don't test critical thinking. They don't test students' ability to make an argument, to formulate an argument. And I think that's where we're seeing the gap here between the tests that No Child Left Behind is requiring and the skills that these students actually need to go into college. They don't have basic critical thinking skills.
Which blows my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot. Actually, the more that I end up thinking about that kind of thing, especially, I feel like everything that happens in this building in Purnell is some sort of form of critical thinking. I mean, from design to just taking a script and casting it and putting it on stage, to figuring out how to make a turntable move. All of that stuff is, there might be answers we can use to guide us, but there isn't an answer out there for what we do. So the idea that students are potentially coming out of public schools without a solid foundation of critical thinking blows my mind.
Right. It's also, there's no way to cheat at the test of theater.
Right.
You can't. It's solve the problem of designing Macbeth. Ready, go. Oh, let me look at the back of the book. No, there isn't. So you have to be able to do that sort of thing.
Clearly rust.
I mean, it's concerning. This No Child Left Behind was established in 2002, 2003. So we're seeing 10 years of this in action right now. And if it's this bad already with this first class getting into college, I'm really concerned about the damage that's going to be done in the future if we don't do something to correct this.
Yeah, education in this country is kind of terrible.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say about that.
Well, yeah. Pretty much the nail on the head there, Margo.
I guess we'll see where No Child Left Behind leads us in the next few years.
I think the thing that possibly to take away, though, before we finally do move on, is that at no point, can you not actually move on from your potentially debilitating educational foundations. If you can get into college, and sometimes that's a big if, you have opportunities to better yourself or become a better student. And I don't know. I'm puttering out there.
Okay. Go to
Great.
college.
Moving on.
The next article, we're going to talk a little bit about race. Margo, tell us about it.
Sure, exactly. So this is an article called All the People. It's written by Clayton Lord for artsjournal.com. And there's an interesting framing of this article. Basically, Lord is asking, what do we mean when we say we make universal art? Many of us like to think that our art is universal, and often people make this claim when they are applying for grants or when they're trying to find audiences. And so he's really trying to get a handle on what universal means functionally to us. So he tells this story about how recently a Canadian banknote was made that featured what might have been an Asian doctor, and it didn't do well in focus groups, and so they changed it to a race-neutral figure, by which they meant Caucasian.
Yeah,
but what's bizarre about that is that it's not really race-neutral. You can't actually avoid depicting an ethnic group, and so it's kind of this problem that what people think of as race-neutral, or when in a script you see like no race indicated for a character, people in their head think, well, that's a white character,
right.
which is problematic. So we assume that our work is universal rather than thinking about how to make it more widely appealing. So my question is there any such thing as universal art? Do we need to be concerned about making it? Are we successful about making it here at CMU?
As universal art or as racially universal art? Because like I think there's a difference there between.
Well, I think that's his question. That like universal art is that which appeals across racial and ethnic groups. And so he was talking about this in relation to audience development, basically. That if you say we are making a piece of theater and this is a really universal story that should appeal to anyone, is that really the case? Is there a way to make universal art?
I don't know if in practice it's possible, but I also think that there's plenty of plays that I've read that I think anyone can relate to. That doesn't mean that they will, or that certain communities will latch onto the story. Mm-hmm. But I think that there are shows that address us at our most basic human mm-hmm. level. Beckett comes to mind at the moment, and again, he's not wide appealing, but I think that there are a core set of human values that are universal and that can be addressed in different ways.
Yeah, well, certainly, I'm going to default to Shakespeare because I love him. But, but I think a lot of that is in interpretation. And, I don't know if you really can necessarily make a completely, truly universal art form. I think, mm-hmm. You can make some of the people happy all the time, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And I think that might translate very directly to this and what he's talking about in this article, that you're not going to be able to appeal to every single person with with any one thing.
I think so. And what's interesting, one of the things that he pointed out, or he was quoting actually Ian David Moss, who writes a blog called Creatiquity, which if you don't follow it, you should check it out. But it's about this sort of paternalistic feeling that like, oh, if all these people of color just don't know what they're missing when they don't come see Shakespeare. Right. Obviously, our art is universal, and we know what good art is. So all of these black folks and brown folks should come and see our shows, rather than thinking about like what are their opportunities for art? What sort of art are they interested in?
I don't understand. We did Raise It in the Sun last year. I know what you mean, but. Again, like if you're not, we talked about this a couple weeks ago too, with artistic directors, being mainly white men mm-hmm. or white, mm-hmm. and trying to and claiming that they, made a grand appeal to multiple varying races, and it's not so much we don't want to, it's they just don't know how.
Well, yeah, I also want to draw a little bit on. They kind of got into some bigger ideas about how we. I don't know where I was going with that. Drawing on a little bit of my anthropology background, what we talk about is cultural relativism. And cultural relativism is this idea that we are the product of the society in which we are born. So the ideas and the beliefs that we have are a product of the society that's built around us. So I think a wider consciousness of the societal things that are in place that make us believe what we do, mm-hmm. Maybe would help us interact with our audience a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah, it's an interesting question, and it's really, I think thinking about how we frame these questions, you know, Creatiquity sort of talks about, is it based on the institution? Like, obviously this institution is doing the right thing, so how do we get people of color to come see these shows? How do we get more, as he puts it, why aren't there more butts of color in these seats? Or, you know, is the question, if we're really interested in multiculturalism and diversity, is it about, you know, we want people to feel like they have opportunities to lead an expressive life? How do we make sure that these people have opportunities to lead expressive lives, whatever that means, and in a sort of less top-down kind of way? So I mean, I think it's a really interesting framing of the question, as you say, from like an anthropological standpoint. So yeah.
And the answer might be that it's not about getting people's of any colors butts in the seats. Maybe it's, you know, maybe it can't be solved with a traditional theatrical form.
Yeah.
You know, maybe that going to a theater to see a play is not the way to do it. Maybe it's about, you know, getting more of it out there to where people who aren't coming to see theater already are. I don't know how to do that, but you know, it's...
Yeah, but it's something to think about when you find yourself thinking, oh, this is the default, or, oh, I don't have any culture, or, you know, whatever those sort of problematic assumptions are. I think it's definitely worth keeping in mind that there is no default.
Yeah.
Well, so we don't know, you know, what the answer to universal art is, but a piece of art that has been universal.
Oh, you're going to talk about this,
I'm going to
you?
talk about this. Is Phantom of the Opera. So, leave me alone. This is an article that comes to us from NPR. It's entitled 25 Years Strong, Phantom of the Opera Kills and Kills Again. So on January 26th, Phantom of the Opera, the musical, experienced its 25th anniversary, and with each show that goes on, it becomes the longest running Broadway musical ever. It's had 130 million audience members worldwide, and it has grossed $5.6 billion.
More than all the Star Wars films combined.
Oh, you were waiting for that, weren't you?
So I have some opinions on this, but should Phantom still be running? Why is Phantom still running?
It seems like shows run longer now than they used to, because there have been a lot of record-breaking shows since the 80s or so. So what I started thinking about is, why is it that people want to see what they're familiar with? Because I've seen Phantom twice in my life. I know people who go back to Phantom again and again, like they go every Christmas or something. It's a nice, cheery family story. You know?
Oh, it's so romantic.
Right.
Bring you the sewers.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if it's
creepy opera.
Is it, if it's just that we're interested in the familiar and we don't want anything new or challenging in our lives. You know, I'm not sure why Broadway shows run longer now than
yeah, but what about Phantom? Like, is there
What about it?
Is there something universal in Phantom that?
Yes, I mean, why do people love Phantom so much? Obviously, there's a love for the show.
Yes,
You
there
cannot
clearly
deny. There's
is
a following here.
a huge following, fans with a PH, if you will.
If you will.
I can't do that either, but
No, I will. There is no argument that Phantom of the Opera has a following and is beloved by millions and millions of people. And you know, for all accounts, fine. That's great. I personally am kind of tired of it, but that just means that I'm not going to pay money to go see it again. But there is a vast appeal to it, and I think a little bit it's a very Disneyfied story. It all sort of wraps up in the end. I mean, granted, he died, but you know, like it's not the
He doesn't die. Spoiler warning. He doesn't die. There's a sequel.
He doesn't die. Oh, there's a sequel. That's right.
I mean,
I've drunk this.
you know that I love musical theater, and you know, Phantom is one that I've seen and that I love. It's spectacular. The music's good. It's escapist theater,
It's
but
very escapist, and I think
escapist.
there is probably more of a crux than anything else
Yeah.
as to why it's so appealing. I mean,
I think Phantom and Les Mis are kind of in the same category as this long-running. It's very emotional.
They're
It's
very
very
epic.
emotional.
Yeah.
Epic, and it's emotionally manipulative, but we love it
and
anyway.
there's a grand amount of spectacle to it too. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, especially for it being 25 years old, that still, you know, I mean, there are numerous scenes, catacombs, the big staircase, There's
The
lots. The
chandelier.
chandelier.
That's iconic though. That's become that's become an iconic.
It has,
musical
and it's
theater
been
piece.
reinvented enough times, especially with I think it was the show in Vegas where it falls apart into multiple pieces and then gets rebuilt and all that stuff. It does have I don't know, a certain amount of universality that is appealing to many people. I'm kind of tired of it.
For me, this is actually a good piece for me because this is a show that my mom saw and then took me to when I was young. And so I think this is the kind of show that, does get passed on, which is something that I appreciate. I think it brings people into the theater because of that. This is one of the first musicals that I saw, and here I am today, pursuing musical theater. So I understand its appeal, I understand its spectacle, and I appreciate its place in Broadway theater.
Absolutely. Like I said, in no way that I'm trying to say it shouldn't have run for as long as it has, or doesn't deserve the appeal and the notoriety that it does.
And in any case, Andrew Lloyd Webber is laughing all the way to the bank.
Oh yeah, he
every
is.
single day.
Yep.
Well, I guess we'll see how much longer Phantom continues to run. Another 25 years. Here's to another 25 years of Phantom.
Cheers.
So we're going to move on now to an article about something that's not so new. We're going to talk about 3D printing. Margo.
Yeah, bring it.
Oh, Jake.
Yeah, me. It's me. So this is another article from NPR.org, actually from the All Tech Considered, which I love that pun. The article is called As 3D Printing Becomes More Accessible, Copyright Questions Arise. It's by Stephen Henn. And the article details how a group of people in Madrid used a Microsoft Kinect, and hacked it, and used it to scan one of the NPR correspondents, and then took that to a tech shop in California, I think they said, and 6,000 miles away, and printed her on a MakerBot 3D printer, which is a 3D printer that uses like a hot glue or a hot plastic and does multiple sweeps and prints whatever file they've got. And so that was the event that put forth this article, and then it goes on to talk about how as this technology becomes not only more popular but much more accessible, I think they talked about how the software that they used on the Kinect and to process the 3D image is a small enough program that it can fit on an iPad. So literally anyone can have this now. And
anyone who can afford an iPad.
Well, anyone who can afford an iPad or steal one. And the MakerBot 3D printer is only like $2,000 all said and done. So it's very, very quickly becoming a very accessible technology. And with that accessibility is popping up all of these questions of copyright and, should people be allowed to print out their really crappy Yoda bust that was also in the article. Was not very good. And where should the line be drawn, and does this become a form of censorship if we can't, can I come up with a 3D image or a 3D thing and sell it or give it to somebody else to print for their own sake, and is there someone losing out from all of this? And we talked about 3D printing a lot, but I don't really think the issue here is the 3D printing. I think that's just the symptom, or the catalyst rather, for this. I think a bigger argument for copyright infringements, copyright law, and this censorship and this universality of this technology that started from a very open source and open technology that was being shared actively across the world.
Copyright's on its way out, man.
Yeah.
Revolution is here. Well, they talk about in the article, anarchy in the UK, that you can't sue the genie back into the bottle.
Yeah.
And they made some parallels to the music industry, the digital music. They had to change the entire system of how they sold music, and it's meant a lot of changes for the industry and even in how music is made and distributed. So I don't know. I think copyright is dumb in general.
She says with no copyright patents of her own.
Right, exactly. Well, like I said, but I've said previously that nothing that I do can really be copyrighted, so I'm probably never going to have this problem. But I think it creates more in the way we've started to use it, which is to copyright and to patent everything and to just sue the crap out of anyone who we think we can get some money from. I think is very hurtful to creativity. And so I think that eventually these people are going to get their pantsuit off, and that's too bad, in my opinion.
Or the other side of it is that the whole system of copyright might just crumble around us because people might just start going around it. Like, I think the big problem with talking about, you know, the lawsuits around copyright infringement is that how do you enforce that stuff? If I'm in my basement printing out, you know, 100 busts of Yoda, that I'm gonna
Disney's not gonna come after you for that.
Probably not. Even if I'm selling them on Etsy or something, like it's real hard, and that's an extreme example and probably a much more enforceable example than reality. But how do you enforce that kind of stuff? Like, you know, there's nothing stopping me from going to Pier 1 and seeing a chair that I really like, and then going upstairs into the shop and building one, and building 4 of them, or building 100 of them, and giving them away or selling them. And Pier 1 can't fucking stop me.
I think what needs to happen is that these companies need to react in a way that they can use this to their advantage. So if that's selling, you know, the template for a Yoda thing, they're making some profit, maintaining some control over it. Otherwise, I don't really think there's anything you can do to stop this at all.
Yeah.
So it seems like the Yoda busts out there right now are sort of crappy. And if you know, Disney wanted to take advantage of that, they could sell a better template for a Yoda.
I mean, I think they're going to have to get online and get into these programs and control it that way if they're going to go after.
Well, there's talk about, you know, we talked a few weeks ago about the 3D printed gun, and how there's talk of legislation that much the way that most 2D paper printers have firmware inside of them that prevents them from printing money. And putting something in these 3D printers that would physically prevent them from producing certain pieces of hardware that could be used in a weapon of some kind, that kind of thing. But I think that's real hard to blanket. Like, you can do that for a couple different models or a couple different pieces, but I think there's a lot of really smart nerds out there who, if they want to do something, they're going to find a way to do it.
Yep.
And I think Lauren's exactly right. You have to, these companies and these people who hold these copyrights are going to have to change with the times and change with the technology, or they're going to get phased out somehow.
Well, we'll keep an eye.
Wish Matt Rohn over here. If Matt Rohn over here, he would have so much to say about this.
I mean, we will certainly keep an eye on 3D printing. This continues to be an interesting story to follow.
It continues to come up. So
we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about Actors Equity and a landmark that they have hit. Margo.
Yes, so the Actors Equity Association is now 100 years old. Older than all the Star Wars movies combined.
It was a long time ago.
So the subtitle of this, they're writing several articles about equity's history, and this one is about how Actors Equity pushed for racial equality. It's from Playbill.com by Robert Simonson. So basically it's about the history of how Equity fought for equal treatment for its members, and it did it in some really interesting sort of practical ways. I like that they had a committee formed in 1944 called the Hotel Accommodations Committee, which is so like euphemistic, but basically the problem is that that white hotel owners wouldn't let black performers stay in their hotels because they were still segregated at that point. So they created a committee to solve this small practical problem that was really just about the nuts and bolts of equality. So in 1947. They started to tell venues that if you don't integrate your audiences, you can't employ equity members, and that was sort of the end of segregated audiences, because eventually when they renegotiated the contract, the venues just gave up. So there were some really practical things that Equity did to sort of fight for equality. Which is great. And I think what's difficult nowadays in the struggle for equality, as we've just sort of talked about, is the lines get a little blurrier.
Yeah, it's real hard. I mean, it was really easy then to say, well, we're not going to sit black people next to white people because that's wrong. And that's really easy. That's very, there's no gray area, no pun intended. Like, it's a really easy line to see. And nowadays, you're right, it's really starting to get fuzzy. How do you fight stuff or how do you stand up against stuff that's a lot harder and a lot more difficult to see and to distinguish?
Yeah, and I think so many times there are these, shades of gray, and that people think that it's a matter of opinion. Is this oftentimes it comes up in casting, which is something that equity has this vested interest in, but like should we just put white actors in yellow face for this show? Okay, spoiler warning, no, you should not. But people, that comes up all the time, where that production of Clybourne Park in Germany that they were going to do in blackface, not okay. But those are the sorts of things that
it's an artistic choice.
Right, but that's the thing, that somebody somewhere still thinks that like that is okay. And so I think that's what's so difficult about sort of fighting for equality nowadays, that it's so insidious, and there are a lot of people who have the attitude that like, we live in a post-racial society, which is clearly not true. I disagree. So I would say I'd be interested to see what equity can continue to do to push for their members to have equality. But I think it does get more difficult as these problems get a little more slippery.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good story for equity for the unions, and certainly a very risky move, I think, at that time, for them to sort of stand up and say, well, you guys suck, and you should do this because it's important. And they could have easily have backed down and created a second union for black actors or actors of other races or something like that, but they didn't, and they fought very hard for that one, for that thing, and that's a good on you.
Yeah, and I think it's a great example of union power, and people coming together to fight for their rights.
This is not a part of actors or equity history that I was aware of, so this was a really fascinating read for me, and I really appreciate the work that they continue to do for our actors.
And their stage managers.
And their stage managers, of course. Very important. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about safety in the shop. Jake, take it away.
Oh yeah, so here is a article from ProSoundWeb. It's called "Putting Safety First in Live Sound" by Craig Lehrman. And this article was really just a list of good practice to do specifically for sound and sound support and for sound technicians, but also there are a lot of general points and tips for just about anyone working at any kind of venue or any kind of gig, he kept calling them, in the modern vernacular. It's anything from as basic as wear safety glasses and wearing hearing protection, because if you're a sound technician, your hearing is your money maker, so protect them. Protecting things are important. Wear boots. To things that I actually, even as a technical director, didn't necessarily know about. Connect your grounds first before you do anything else with electricity, because you need to make sure that it's safe and that kind of thing. And look up before you go up in a genie to make sure you're outside, and make sure you don't go up into power lines, which happens all the time, sadly enough. So and then the comments on this were some were like, oh yeah, good, great, thanks for that list, I'm out. And there were a couple that were less welcoming, but at the same time, in terms of, we should all know this.
Sure.
This shouldn't be news. This shouldn't be new to a lot of people. We should all know that it's important to be safe and to follow safe practices. Why is this on the green page?
Yeah, I think what sort of sums it up is that the line in the article that brains are our most important safety equipment.
Yes.
Use your brain.
Which ties directly into critical thinking.
Right.
Yes.
Learn to be critical. Learn to critical think. Think critically.
So be safe in the shop, please. I'm going to finish off with our last article here. This is an article from Box of Crayons. This is actually an interview with Brene Brown, author of The Gifts of Imperfection. Brene Brown is a research professor at the University of Houston. She's a sociologist, and her work focuses on vulnerability, courage, authenticity, and shame. So that's kind of the core of her research, which is pretty fantastic. So in this article with Michael Dungay-Stanier, she talks about a few things. She talks about doing work that's meaningful, how you can find work that's meaningful in your life, and about vulnerability. And I think that this has a lot of implications for us as artists, as theater practitioners. What did you guys find useful about this article?
I thought she said so many great things, and I wrote down many of them, but the idea of looking for the sort of work that's meaningful to you was really important. Sometimes we don't get to choose the work that we get to do, but I think that we have more of a choice when we're here at school, maybe a little bit more control over the sorts of projects, especially that we're doing in class, and really taking risks. She talked about how meaningful work is not at the end of a well-trod path, right? If you want to find something that's meaningful to you, you're probably going to have to make the path as you walk, which I thought was really great. And the idea that you shouldn't look outside yourself to find out what everyone else is doing. You know, when you're on those standardized tests and you're just sort of like, what are you guys doing? You can't, but that doesn't, you can't do that, right? You can't do that in theater. You know, you're not going to make Phantom of the Opera or insert your idea. Phantom of the Opera 2. Maybe you are. But you're not going to make great, meaningful work by looking at what other people are doing. You really have to find what it is that you should do.
Stepping back just one step here is that in your choice to be a director, are you not choosing a path that is meaningful to you? I mean, I know that project to project, that's a thing, but I think all of us seem to have chosen a career that is meaningful to us, that is driving us forward.
Well, especially for us, since we've come back to school, right. And we've returned to student loans and massive debt, to do something that is meaningful to us in potentially, you know, not the easiest way or not the most lucrative way or even the most effective way, potentially. And yeah, I mean, she spoke about a lot of things that really kind of hit, and I can't remember if she said this in this interview or I've seen a couple of her TED Talks. I think actually from you.
Yeah, they're excellent. Check it out.
About just this. It's okay to be abjectly terrified about your next step, and everyone is, whether they admit it or not, and that's okay. Take a breath and go, because I'm paraphrasing, of course, but like that really spoke to me on a personal and a professional level of insofar as it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to, you know, acknowledge them and get back up, because that's the important part of what you do. I love how she addresses vulnerability. I think this is something, you know, that as an artist we deal with constantly, that there's this constant fear of putting yourself out there, of, you know, putting this idea out there that, you know, might fail, it might be brilliant. But it's this constant struggle that we deal with and this constant fear that we deal with in that way. And in the interview, she talks about how in life we kind of put on this face and we say we're going to fight everything and we're going to go after it, and we don't really embrace the vulnerability. But she also says that vulnerability is the birthplace of creativity and courage and innovation. So I think embracing the fear and accepting it and moving forward anyway is a huge part of what we do in our process. And I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah, and that's a good way to think of it. We talked a couple weeks ago or last week about the IKEA table, that what you make with your own hands becomes more precious to you because you have brought it into the world, you have worked on it, it's a part of you. And it's very difficult to bring that out there to an initial creative launch or to a meeting and have people say, oh, no, all wrong. But you'll learn something from that, right?
And that's also courage. Vulnerability is not shameful, it's courage. And this is, another topic that she addresses in her work beyond this, but that's huge.
Yeah, it was a great talk. I thought it was very inspiring. I'll listen to it again when I when I feel that I don't know what I'm doing with my life.
Wallowing in self-doubt.
I have actually followed Brene Brown. I've read a couple of her books. I've seen her TED Talks. I cannot recommend her enough. She's inspiring. Her work addresses, I think, everything that's at the heart of the creativity that we have to deal with every day. So I highly recommend it.
Yeah. And she also seems to practice what one of the things she said is that if you can't be excited about what you're doing, other people won't be, which is, especially to me as a director, my job is to sort of get other people to buy in to a project. She clearly, this has clearly worked so well for her, and she's come to it through, pain and vulnerability and needing a lot of courage to do what she's doing. So I think that's very great to watch someone who has succeeded in that way, just like our productivity expert earlier practices what he preaches and is successful because of it.
And you can identify with her and kind of strive for that in that way. So
yeah.
Brene Brown, check her out. On that note,
Podcast approved.
Podcast approved. On that note, that's all we've got for today. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week.
Bye-bye.
We should auto-tune the podcast.
No, we should not auto-tune the podcast.
More
That's a
people
horrible idea.
No, just one. Just a thought. I think it'd be hilarious, okay? When we have a viral YouTube hit.
A 57-minute long viral.
No,
There's a lot of
it's a
those.
greatest hits auto-tune.
Oh.